Hello mga ka-Buttercup! If you are new to our channel, please like and subscribe. Enjoy the rest of the video!
A tremendous morning to everyone. I'm Captain Rodriguez, and I'll be discussing Annelids and Allied Taxa together with my groupmate. So in here shown is a cladogram of Annelida. So under Annelida is Annelida, and it is composed of two clades, namely Arancia and Sedentaria. And also, beside that is Sipuncola, which is the sister taxa of phylum Annelida. So first, let's talk about annelids. So when we hear the word annelids, what comes first in your mind? So worms, worms. It's fine. Okay, so annelids illustrate metamerism. So what do you mean by metamerism? Metamerism or metameres it refers to segmentation. So segmentation is similar body segments as well as organ systems that are serially repeated one after another. So in segmentation, if one segment fails, another could still function, and metamerism also makes independent segmental movements possible. So segmented worms living in marine, freshwater, and moist terrestrial habitats. In here, marine bristleworms, leeches, and the familiar earthworms belong to this group. Phylum Annelida, or annelids. It came from the Latin word annulus, meaning little ring, plus ida, which is the suffix. In phylum Annelida, the most familiar ones are earthworms and freshwater worms, and also leeches, which will be further discussed by my group mates in a while. In phylum Annelida, the bodies are divided into similar segments, or metameres, segmentation, and it is externally marked by annuli, or circular rings. It is also sometimes called bristleworms, and most annelids bear setae. So setae are hair-like structures like in earthworm, and it has a two-part head, namely prostomium and peristomium. Prostomium is the portion of the front head situated in front of the mouth, while the peristomium is the portion in the anterior end, and it assists the annelid's body to be pushed into the soil. Next. Here are the characteristics of a phylum Annelida. First, it has a unique annelid head and paired epidermal setae present. 2. Marine freshwater terrestrial. Third, moist free-living. Correction, this is moist. Fourth, metameric or segmented. Fifth, triploblastic body. So triploblastic meaning it has 3 germ layers, just like humans. Sixth, coelom is well developed and divided by septa. So ang septa muna siya singular term sa septate. Then seventh, epithelium secretes the outer transparent, moist cuticle. 8. It has a complete digestive system. 9. The body wall with outer circular and inner longitudinal muscle layers. 10. The nervous system with a double ventral nerve cord and a pair of ganglia with lateral nerves in each segment. Then 11. Its sensory system of tactile organs, taste buds, statocysts in some, photoreceptor cells, and eyes with lenses in some. 12. Asexual reproduction by fission and fragmentation. Asexual meaning it doesn't need the opposite sex to reproduce. 13. hermaphroditic or separate sexes. Hermaphroditic meaning uh, the person, the annelid has both male and female organ in one. The 14th excretory system typically has a pair of nephridia for each segment. Nephridia is a tubule that acts as an organ of excretion. And 15th, respiratory gas exchange through skin, gills, or parapodia. And lastly, it has a closed circulatory system. Next, Plaistoannelida. So in Plaistoannelida, it has two large clades, as mentioned earlier, namely, first, Erantia, and second, Sedentaria.
Under the Erantia is the polychaetes. Polys means many, chaete means long hair. Polychaetes comprises mothel, which means they are capable in movement, and they can be found or they live under rocks, in coral crevices, or in abandoned shells. Some polychaetes are planktonic, which means they are just carried by tides and currents, and they cannot swim well enough to move against these forces. They are brightly colored in reds and greens, iridescent or dull. Polychaetes have parapodia and no clitellum. For the forms and functions, a polychaete typically has a prostomium, which may or may not be retractile and which often bears eyes, tentacles, and sensory bulbs. The prostomium surrounds the mouth and may bear seta, bulbs or in predatory forms, and chitinous jaws. The polychaete trunk is segmented, and most segments bear parapodia, which may have lobes, cirri, seta, and other parts on them. Parapodia typically are used in crawling. They usually serve as the chief respiratory organs, although some polychaetes also have gills. For the nutrition, they are usually predators and scavengers. The digestive system of a polychaete consists of a foregut, a midgut, and a hindgut. For the circulation and respiration, they have no special organs for respiration. In many polychaetes, the exchange of gases takes place via the epidermis, and special respiratory organs are absent. In some errant polychaetes and most sedentary forms, however, the respiration is effected by gills or bronchi, and also the septa are incomplete. The coulommic fluid assumes the function of circulation. Many polychaetes have respiratory pigments such as hemoglobin, chlorocroin, or hemerythrin. For the excretion or excretory, most polychaetes have metanephridia. So, annelids excrete their nitrogenous waste in the form of ammonia. As ammonia readily diffuses into the water, the majority of this nitrogen is likely to pass through the body wall, but limited ang iyang capacities. However, ang excretory organs nila is mas active in maintaining water and ion balances. So, but there is one pair per segment, each ending with a nephrostomy that opens into a coulommic compartment. Then the coulommic fluid passes into the nephrostomy, and selective resorption occurs along the nephridial duct. For the nervous system and sense organs, central nervous systems in polychaetes follows the basic annelid plan. Sense organs are highly developed in polychaetes and include eyes, nuchal, organs, and statocysts. Eyes are most conspicuous in errant worms. Some burrowing and tube-building polychaetes have statocysts that function in body orientation. So for the reproduction and development, they have no permanent sex organs. And have separate sexes. Many polychaetes hatch from their eggs into a particular type of planktonic larva, the trophophore, which later metamorphoses into a juvenile annelid. Some polychaetes, however, it can reproduce asexually by budding. Pulra yung reproductive systems. No? Here's how it works. Gonads appear as temporary swellings of the peritoneum and shed their gametes into the column. The gametes are then carried to the outside through gonadocs, through the metonepredia, or by rupture of the body wall. Okay. Some polychaetes live most of their year as sexually immature animals called attocs. But during the breeding season, a portion of the body becomes sexually mature and swollen with gametes. And also, fertilization is done externally. There are three representative members of Erantia, the clamworms, killworms, and fireworms. The clamworms, they are sometimes called sandworms. They live in mucus-lined burrows in or near low tide. They occupy temporary hiding places. For example, under stones. Mas active sila at night. Nag-contain og 206 segments ilang body. The head is composed of a prostomium and peristomium, and feed on small animals, other worms, and a variety of larval forms. The skillworms, one of the most diverse, abundant, and widespread of polychaete families. Flatten ang ilang bodies na covered with broad scales. Carnivorous sila, and many are commensal, and living in burrows of other polychaetes or in association with cnidarians, mollusks, or echinoderms. And for the fireworms, hollow, brittle seta contain a poisonous secretion. That's why they are called fireworms. Fireworms feed on corals, gorgonians, and other cnidarians. Okay, that's all.
Moving on to the next large clade under Annelida is the sedentaria. So in sedentaria, its body plan is much like that of errant polychaetes, except that the head is often modified by the addition of tentacles used for food capture. So, daghan na kay siya mga tentacles above sa iyang head, but nga under siya sa sedentarian. And the parapodia are often small as well. Just like in the picture shown, you can observe na ang tentacles, daghan siya tentacles nga slim, nga mo'y gamiton pag-capture sa mga food. Nasa yung metopodia, neuropodia, dapat siya gills. So, kani siya, mo siya amphitrite. Next. So, if ang katong iran siya, kay naa siya iyang representative members, ang sedentaria nabot siya iyaha. So, first, kay ang tube worms, then bandworms and parchment worms. So, tube worms. So, tube worms are tube dwellers. They may line their burrows with mucus, and they use cilia or mucus to obtain food. So, meaning sa burrow kay mo na siya mag-create siya og hole or tunnel duct. Then, ang mucus mo na siya ang viscous fluid na mo-moisten, mo-lubricate, o mo-protect sa passages in the digestive and respiratory tracts of the body. So later on, I'll be showing you some clips about any representative members of Sedentaria. Next. Next is panworms, which are also known as feather duster worms. So they unfurl tentacular crowns to feed, and the food moved from radioles to mouth by ciliary action. So radial, mo na ilang heavily ciliated feather-like tentacle, anong na silang babaw ng mga hair. And lastly is the parchment worm. So a parchment worm lives in a U-shaped tube and it has modified segments nga mo-pump og water gikan sa iyahang tube. Ma-observe nimo sa picture nga mao na murag iyang suyupon og style. Ang sand dira sa iyang proboscis. So kada proboscis man ang extensible tubular sucking organ. So figure 17.11 or Arnicola, the lugworm, lives in a U-shaped burrow in intertidal mudflats. It burrows by successive eversions and attractions of its proboscis. By peristaltic movements, it keeps water filtering through the sand. The worm then ingests the food-laden sand. And now, let's tackle about the family Suboclinidae or Pugophorans. So formerly members of phylum Pugonophora or breadworms. They are most small, less than 1 millimeter in diameter. And they mostly live in mud in the ocean floor at depths of 100 to 10,000 meters. So very deep, like ubos na jud kaayo nga maglisod nag-abot ang light dito dakita. Tubes have a general upright orientation in bottom sediments, and in fact, tubes are generally 3 or 4 times the length of an animal. Long cylindrical body covered with cuticle, and it is divided into a short anterior forepart and a long slender trunk and a small opisthosoma. So mo ni siya. Mo ni ang iyahang body structure. You can observe. Then, they don't have a mouth or a digestive tract, and nutrients such as glucose and amino acids are absorbed from seawater through sa ilahang pinnules, and microvilli of tentacles. Then, next, let's tackle about Eucheridae. It's a sausage shape that is also known as spoonworms. They live in empty snail shells or sand darts or rocky crevices, and it is found in all oceans. Length varies from a few millimeters to 40 or 50 centimeters. So gamay siya. It has a simple nervous system with a ventral nerve running length of the body. It is a ciliated groove on the proboscis that allows them to gather detritus over the mud while lying buried. Its muscular body wall is covered by a cuticle and epidermis. So mo ni ang iyahang internal anatomy of a Eucherian worm. It has a large xylem, niya iyahang digestive tract kay long and coiled. Most have a closed circulatory system with colorless blood, and the respiration usually occurs in the hindgut. Sexes are separate. Gonads are produced by special regions in the peritoneum in each sex. Then the fertilization is done externally, and early cleavage in chocophore stages similar to annelids. So, moving on, let's tackle about clade Clitellata, which consists of oligochaetes and class Hirudinida, which will be further discussed by my groupmate.
Hello, I am tasked to report about. So, in oligochaetes, we have earthworms. Earthworms are 300 species. They live in terrestrial or freshwaters. They contain setae. In every segment, they have 4 setae. Setae means they hair-like bristles. of an organism. So in their forms and functions, they mix soil as they dig down and pull them up. So as our parents, sometimes our parents hire farmers to mix these soils whenever we plant something. So here in earthworms, they'll do that for free. And then next is whenever in wet weather, they are found near the surface. And then in dry weather, they are found underground. In the movement of earthworms, we have peristaltic movement, the contraction of circular muscles in the anterior and lengthen the body, pushing the anterior end forward. And then we have when it contracts, the longitudinal muscle shorten the body and pulling the posterior end forward. They also have circulatory and excretory structures that are typically of annelids in general. So they have digestive and nervous system. And then earthworms are sometimes called as knife crawlers. The nutrition. So most oligochaetes are scavengers. They feed mainly on decaying and organic matter. Decaying leaves. Those ready to organic materials like those leaves, those decaying. So in the pathway of food, we have the prostomium, where we can find the mouth, considered as the opening of an anterior end. And then we have the pharynx. The pharynx is where moistened secretions of food, which is the soil, and dead. In esophagus, we have the pathway encaged by aortic vessels. So next is we have the crop. The crop considered as the storage facility holding tank to hold food. And then here we have the gizzard that grinds food into smaller pieces. Next is we have the intestine, which the digestions and absorptions occur. We have, so in respiration, earthworms has no special respiratory organs. They must be kept moist to allow diffusion. So that's what I've said earlier. They have to, in dry weathers, they have to stay deeper in the soil rather than are compared to wet weathers where they don't need to be under the soil or deeper because the wetness of the soil is keeping them moist. In the sense organs, they are located all over the body. They don't have eyes but have many photoreceptors in the epidermis. Earthworms stay away from bright lights and moves towards the dark lights. So in general behaviors, chemical, we have they aid in food choices. Earthworms sense their textures, acidity, and calcium. So in light, they avoid light unless it's very weak because at some point, lights give them energy, but not so much light because it will not keep them from leaving. So in mechanical stimulation, they are way too negative to strong vibrations. And if they sense these strong vibrations, they burrow quickly.
So formally start by saying good day everyone. This would be Nina Faith Nanyas Farmisin, leaving all the way from the heritage city of the South, Cracker City. So here we go. So we have here class Herodini. So best example for this are those liches. If you're familiar, let's see later what's liches looks like. Most liches are freshwater, some are marine or terrestrial. They have 500 species, if I'm not mistaken. I just put them temporary because based on my research, that's the number of species they have. And some of the results are, it's more than 500. So this example are liches. So this is what liches looks like. Those who's not familiar with this can be found mostly sa wet water. Pero I saw this one time sa I think sa Kahumayan or Basakan bang name during my childhood. This is linta in Tagalog. and in Visaya, I think it's alimatok. So there are different leeches. We have the ribbon, tiger, and medicine and horse. Leeches that are common to us is this what we call the medicine leeches. Um, this one, the horse and the ribbon leeches, they have its differences. So horse leeches sometimes find their way into a bucket of ribbon leeches at bait shops. And aside from physical appearance, one of the most distinct differences between the two is that horse leeches simply don't catch many fish, and each of these leeches has 34 segments and divided by annulus. Leeches have two brains based on the reference book. Leeches have two brains, is located in the anterior and also posterior. In the anterior part, they have pairs of fused ganglia forming a ring around pharynx. The posterior part naman is 7 pairs of fused ganglia. But based on my research, leeches has 32 brains. Why? Because leech is an annelid, meaning that it is belong to a category of animals with segmented bodies. The leech bodies consist of 32 segments. Each of each of the 32 segments has its own brains. So the body structure of these leeches, it is parapodia and head appendages. Mostly setae are absent. Setae occur in anterior segments. So here, the external structures, like parapodia and head appendages, leeches are dorsoventrally flattened and tapered anteriorly. Anterior and posterior part have have suckers. So leeches has its own movement. So they have also locomotion, and it looks like this one, like this. When the when the posterior sucker attaches to a surface, the circular muscles contract, beginning at the posterior end. The leech thus elongates and the anterior sucker fastens to the surface. Then the posterior sucker releases a wave of contraction of a longitudinal muscles move in forward direction. This completes one cycle. So this is the anterior sucker and also this is the posterior sucker. This is what leeches move, locomotions. So this is the close up pictures of what we call lich. So lich is also called is a European medicinal lich or Herodo medicinalis. It has a head sucker located here, and of course a posterior sucker located here. So they have head, the salivary cells, the crop, which the blood storage organ, the intestine, the rectum, the anus, and of course the posterior sucker. So let's see the close up part of their mouth. So they have jaws located here, Right here, the ridge of teeth located here at the center. The salivary ductus located here, located here. Salivary cells, which is this one, and the pharynx in the center, in the middle. And this all is the head sucker. So this is the external morphology of leech. This one is the dorsal view and the ventral view. Dorsal view, they have the eyes here, located here, segmental receptor organs here, and of course the anus and posterior sucker. In the ventral view, they have the anterior sucker, located at some part of the mouth. Then the first nephridipoor, and here the male genital aperture, the female genital aperture located here, and the nephridipores. So we have here the reproductive system of leech. If Have you ever wondered how they produce and how they generate waste? When two leeches find one another and decide to mate, they line up with each other. And one will attach a sac filled with sperm. And that sperm called the spermatophore. The sperm are then released from the sac and literally pierced through the skin of the leech, eventually finding its way to the ovaries. When the sperm finally find their way, the egg, and fertilize it, the leech begins to make a cocon by secreting thick fluids from the clitorium. The eggs the eggs are then inserted in a cocon and what do you call this one? And and the leech find a good place to put it. So, so you have here the nervous system of the leech. Their ventral nerve core, but not present, but cord present, but not fuse. So here, this one. So pharyngeal and supharyngeal glands and the pharyngeal connectives fuse to form a nerve ring. We have also this sense organs, which number one, they have three sense. Okay, three. So the first one is the pigment cups. Pigment cups, the photoreceptor cells. They have negative phototactic, but their behavior change during searching of foods into positive phototactic. Number two, the temperature sensitive structures. Leeches to temperature sensory structures to detect body temperature of mammals. They are sensitive when it comes to temperature because that's one way of finding their foods. So number three is the sensory papillae. These are sensory cells with terminal bristles present in the middle annuli of each segment. The digestive system of the leech, they have um, the nutrition they have is leeches are popularly considered parasitic, but many are predaceous. Most leeches are fluid feeders. Most bloody fluid made a body of invertebrates blood of vertebrates like human, ectoparasites, and predator. Some feed tissue fluids and some from open wounds. Some freshwater leeches are true bloodsuckers, include the so-called medicinal leech or Herodo medicinalis, this one, the leech. So this is what their digestive looks like. From the jaw to pharynx, to esophagus, to scrap chambers, to crop diverticula, to stomach, to intestine, rectum, and of course the posterior, the anus.
Hi everyone, I am the reporter of Phylum Siponcula. So, Phylum Siponcula have approximately 250 species of benthic marine worms and sedentary living in burrows of mud or sand, snail shells, coral crevices, or among vegetation. Some are tiny, slender worms but most range from 3 to 10 cm in length. Some are commonly called peanut worms. So, ang mga peanut worms ay kanang ang siponcula kay kanang naani sila sa magpuyo sa mga lapok or sa mga sand bitaw, like mutago ni siya sa kanang or sand na sa mga shell bitaw, shell ng kanang mga suso bitaw, mga kuan murag snail ing ana yan kanang sa middle, nasa di siya sa middle sa plant niya. Kanang some are small, gamay sila yan. Kanang nauban gagmay yan, daot niya ni siya nga ulod niya kanang, pero daghan ni siya o gagikan sa per daghan gagikan ani niya, like sa 3 cm hantod sa 10 cm nga kataas niya, 10 cm kataas niya. Ang kaniding kuan ang siponcula kay ang common niya na kuan kay peanut worms. So next forms and function: no segmentation or setae, slender retractable introvert or proboscis at anterior wall of the trunk is muscular. Sexes are separate and fertilization occurs in the sea. Chocobor larvae forms resembling Annelida and mollusca larvae. Some species have a chocopore that further develops into a pelagospera. So, sa reproduction kay most siponculans reproduce sexually, and in all but one known case are dioecious. So, ang kanisang reproduction sa siponcula kay kanang siponculan kay kanang external fertilization na jud niya. Kanang not ovaries and ang ovaries og testes niya kay mag-develop ni siya seasonally ra niya. Ang circulatory system: unlike the annelids, siponculans lack a circulatory system with a heart and blood vessels. Excretion occurs via the urns, cells that float in the coelom, collecting waste products and bringing them to nephredia. Nya ang circulation sa kanang siponculans, mga siponculans kay ang male og ang female kay ang male og females mag-release og sperm, male and females release sperm and egg into the water nya. Kanang moagi pa silang duha ka larva diha mahimo silang kanang peanut worms bitaw nya. Ang kanang wala jud ni kanang na siya kanang duha ka chamber nga coelom with circulatory coelomic fluid to transport gases, nutrients, and waste nya. No setae ni siya ya. Kanang ang coelomy fluid mag-contain og red blood cell with generally drab colors. Nya sa iyang body kay mag-divide into two parts, like ang anterior section kay proboscis, so ang introvert na siya. Nya ang posterior and ang posterior end kay mo ni siya ang swollen trunk. Nya ang introvert niya kay naay mga gipalibutan jud sa mga scallop ridge og lobes og tentacles. Kuwilom and metamerism has no satisfactory explanation for the origin. Asa jud nagikan ang metamerismo o kuwilom to gain acceptance niya. Pwede pod makatabang jud ang kuwilom para sa usa ka hydrotastic skeleton. The kuwilom fluid kay mahimo siya circulatory fluid ug ma-reduce ang pag-need sa flame cell. Ma-reduce ang pag-need sa flame cell everywhere niya. Ang kuwilom could store game test for time release niya. And also homologous are the segmentation for annelid, arthropod, and chordates. So ang supporting evidence for hypothesis arose independently multiple times. Ang selective advantage of segmentation body for annelids to lie in the efficiency of burrowing. Phylogeny and adaptive diversification. So, they have paired epidermal setae sa pipila ka eukaryon species na maghatag og kusog na support. So, to use eukaryon kanang kusog na support to use eukaryon inside the annelida. So, sipuglinid eukaryons are considered as member of Sedentaria. Nya, kanang dili metameric o wala sila setae niya. So, ang larval development is similar to annelids, mollusks, and mga eukaryon. The formation of nerve follows a metameric pattern.
And now, moving on to the last part of the presentation, we'll be tackling about the status. And now, moving on to the last part of the presentation, we'll be tackling about the status or conservation of these species. So in phylum Annelida, it is not extinct. Same goes with phylum Sipuncula, which is also not extinct. So both of them are not endangered or threatened as of today. They still exist and they can be seen in our ecosystem. And so, that would be all. Thank you so much for listening. This is Group 4, and see you in our next report.